The world of My Hero Academia. This world is something far different than many. Superpowers, other known as quirks, are embedded in one's body basically at birth. Frankly, you are born with at least something that is remnants of a quirk or a superpower. But in the original version of My Hero Academia, Izuku Midoriya was born with none. But what if Izuku, or Deku, is born with a half fire and half lightning quirk that would make him an absolute force? In this world, Izuku was born to a mother by the name of Inko Midoriya and a father by the name of Hisashi Midoriya. But this was a little different. Inko was actually had a very, very faint lightning quirk, but is more like electricity. Something that she can do is just charge phones, something very simple. Maybe charge little outlets, or maybe even give a little bit of an energy boost to a house, but she wasn't able to do anything crazy. His father would be able to breathe fire, just like, well, normal. Izuku would find promise at the really, really young age of only 4. He would actually be able to use some sort of this electricity or lightning off the bat. Inko was completely shocked. It seems even stronger than hers, and he's only a 4-year-old. This is absolutely insane. He can do so much. But that's not the only thing. That is not the only thing Izuku is capable of, and his mother has no idea what's to come. Izuku would be telling his friends exactly what he's able to do. He's able to shoot lightning or electricity out of his left side of his body. But they're confused. What about the right side? Can he not use anything on the right side? And he says no. For some reason, it just doesn't work at all. It seems to be kind of weird. Odd, in fact. But Izuku doesn't really think much about this. He doesn't think about it, frankly, at all. The electricity quirk, or this lightning quirk that he doesn't know exactly what it's about yet, would be more or less studied and learned about when he goes to the doctors. When he heads to the doctors, he's informed about his quirk, informed about this quirk being actually lightning. It seems odd, but it seems that his body can channel lightning itself, and it would get even stronger in bad weather. It seems he has some sort of channeling, so when he is around electricity, it forms into a more potent type of electricity, being that of lightning. And that's why, even at a young age, his lightning seems so powerful. It's only going to get stronger as time goes on, and he needs to be careful. Of course, his mother questions why he needs to be careful. What are the repercussions? And immediately the doctor says that his quirk may be too strong for this world. And what he means by that is his quirk isn't necessarily, well, built to sustain in a human body. It's a high voltage of electricity and could lead to real bad damage. So he needs to train, and train a lot. Of course, this would scare Izuku just a little bit, but that's not it. The doctor would then explain to Izuku that it's actually more than just lightning. It's actually something crazy, something that he's really hasn't seen before outside of just rumors of this boy that has a fire and ice quirk. They're confused for a second, but then he says that his other side doesn't shoot electricity or lightning because it's supposed to shoot fire. And the reason why he's unable to use it at this moment is because not only he struggles to control it, but on top of that, his body would actually collapse entirely if he used it without proper preparation. Obviously, the doctor explains that it seems that his body is slowly but surely conforming to the electricity, or at least half of his body is, to the point where it can sustain itself, at least to a certain extent. His bones are changing to be more, well, resistant to electricity, but they're not ready for fire just yet. So they should introduce him to fire itself. Yes, it might sound crazy, it might sound absolutely nuts, but they should, or Inko should look into basically leaving Izuku in high temperatures, saunas, and stuff like that. It would actually benefit him in the long run to allow his body to conform to higher temperatures, because if he utilizes both of the quirk, both lightning and fire, it could become real tricky when the voltage and the fire itself elevates his body temperature to extreme amounts, in which they take this very seriously. But Inko does question why his fire would be this different than his father's. His father, who's obviously not here and isn't going to be here, being an absent father at that works overseas, can only breathe fire. Why did Izuku get something so different? The doctor isn't so sure, but in a way, it feels that the doctor knows something that they don't, as if the doctor is hiding something. It's not necessarily he's hiding something, but he knows about this whole quirk evolution. At the end of the day, quirks are evolving more and more to the point that, well, some quirks may even be so strong that it hurts the person so badly that it doesn't actually work as a quirk, actually limiting the age of the people that have these types of quirks, or these sorts of quirks, in which the doctor doesn't bring up, but Izuku can technically more or less restrain his body to the point where it gets that he can actually utilize both of these quirks at tip-top shape, but it would be that difficult. That's why this evolution in quirks are actually happening quicker than the evolution of one's body, which is a scary feat at that. Nonetheless though, Izuku goes out pretty happy. He's happy to hear that his quirk is so amazing. Half lightning, half fire? That's insane. He'll definitely be the next #1 hero. He can totally beat out someone like All Might. There's so many things he could do. And on top of this, the training is pretty simple. Izuku would begin training, but his training would actually be kind of, in a way, laughable. It would be like normal training, you know, working out, stuff like that, just getting ready. Nothing crazy. He is a young kid at that. But funny enough, he actually can use his lightning to kind of store energy in different parts of his house using generators. And generators would store his lightning, or the energy that the lightning makes, and it would actually lower his power bill a far bit, and they would make quite a bit of money off of Izuku's quirk by just selling energy back. Might sound like a funny aspect, but Izuku can utilize this on top of basically just training normally by outputting into generators. In terms of his fire quirk, he has to continue to more or less just work in hot environments, and working in saunas and different higher temperature places that they would slowly but surely increase from the normal of maybe 150 or 170 or even higher than that, basically working his way up. Of course, this would be dangerous for a kid, so they would slowly but surely work on this, as Izuku wants to learn how to utilize his fire quirk and get his body ready to utilize it as well. After some time would pass, only maybe about a year, people would start learning about Izuku's quirk, and they would be in complete awe. Teachers would believe that he's the next up-and-coming top hero, and the only person that could really compete is someone like Bakugou. Bakugou is the only one that's going to be able to compete with him, but Bakugou thinks otherwise. Bakugou believes that he's the best, that nobody else can even keep up with him and is remotely close. But obviously this isn't true. This is the farthest thing from the truth. We're talking about someone that has an explosion quirk versus someone that could use lightning and fire. Izuku's basically a dragon, or basically an insanely OP dragon, but that's beyond the point. Izuku would continue his training, as he's actually pretty loved by everybody and not bullied by any means. I mean, there's no reason for him to be. He's not quirkless, and he has a really strong quirk. But during this time, he would try and keep up with his studies, but it would be pretty difficult to do so when he's training so much. The doctor was serious. He could seriously injure himself if he doesn't basically train properly. So a lot of his time is dedicated to just at least training, quote unquote, or at least utilizing his quirk to the point where he can actually be sustainable. But after some more time would eventually pass, it would actually be perfect timing, and he's able to actually utilize his fire quirk now at about around the age of about 10 to 11. He's able to utilize his fire quirk in very small ways though, igniting burners, lighting a campfire, stuff like that. Other than that, he doesn't want to strain himself, and his other quirk, being that of the lightning quirk, is far stronger, far stronger. His bones, his body has already adapted to the lightning quirk, at least to a certain extent, but there is some repercussions when overutilizing that said lightning quirk. It seems kind of odd, as if there's supposed to be a perfect balance between lightning and fire, but there is no real balance between them. It's kind of weird in a way. In a way, his body is protecting itself from both fire and lightning, but there is still repercussions. I mean, obviously, right? If he utilizes his lightning for too long, there's a good chance he can go basically be paralyzed for a little chunk of time. In terms of fire, if he overheats himself, there could be serious repercussions on his organs. But luckily enough, his lightning has actually prepared his organs to a certain extent for these repercussions of fire. So in a way, they are balanced, but not to the extent that something like a fire and ice quirk would be in terms of heat regulation. There is no heat regulation with Izuku. That's why he needs to train in such temperatures so often, actually to the point where it feels natural for him to be in extreme heat. But with that said though, he doesn't really know much more about his quirk and what to do to utilize it. But all he knows is he's going to have to learn more and more according to his mother. His mother would put him through training, frankly. Of course, Inko would still be the sweetheart she always is, but actually helping him learn more and more about his quirk and how to utilize it and what are the benefits of using both of his quirks. His fire quirk is still far behind, but as school would pass on and as school would continue on, Izuku would continue to thrive in terms of basically his studies now and also his quirk. Because frankly, we all know that studies only matter when you get deeper into age. They don't necessarily matter as much when you're really young. So he's actually able to study a lot harder, especially when he has way more time on his hands, when he doesn't have to train his lightning quirk so much and he has to just focus on his fire quirk. He would sit in his sauna and basically study as much as possible and utilize basically any recovery he possibly could. But luckily they had extra little bit of money, because frankly all of this utilization of different methods of getting stronger and basically getting more stable have become kind of hard on the wallet. And Inko even brings this up, saying that Izuku has definitely paved his own way, being able to utilize his electricity or his lightning to more or less store energy and sell it has allowed him to do a lot of stuff that he wouldn't have been able to if they were just, normal. Because frankly, they wouldn't have had the money, not even close. So luckily they were able to make that up and actually do something about it. More time would pass and middle school would be coming to an end for Izuku, very soon at that. He's excited, but at the same time worried. What if he's not 100% ready? I mean, it's been a long time and he's been training for a long time, but there's people that might be stronger than him, might be more powerful. Doubt would definitely reign on Izuku, questioning himself over and over, but Izuku would be reassured by his mother, telling him that he's gifted. His father, or obviously Inko and his father, were not as gifted as him, nowhere near. So he really and truly needs to utilize those gifts and transcend exactly what they did. They didn't do anything compared to Izuku. Izuku's already done more than they possibly could have in only 15 years, 14 years. And he's not even a hero yet. Soon, he'll be a great hero, a fantastic one. One just like All Might. Inko would smile and more or less reassure Izuku of the a pending version of himself that he will get to, and Izuku is happy to hear this because frankly he just needs motivation. He's been working hard and frankly will continue to work hard throughout this entire time. he's still learning, adapting, and learning more and more with his new quirk, or with his quirk in general, so he's going to continue working absolutely extremely hard. The last day of school would then follow. He would arrive at the middle school, they would speak for a little bit, and the teacher would talk about giving all of them job applications for the future. But he decides that he's not going to give them out, because he knows they all want to go the hero route. The hero route down the path of, well, ones like All Might, Endeavor, and many, many more. This makes all of the class excited, cheering and throwing papers into the sky, basically extremely agreeing with the fact that they all want to go the hero route, in which makes them all kind of, over optimistic. Because frankly, not everybody there is going to make it as far as they especially want to make it. The teacher then talks about how Bakugou and Izuku are striving to get into UA, but Bakugou argues that he's going to be the one that gets in. Izuku can't even properly control both of his quirks yet, or his quirk in general. He can only use his so-called electricity side. Izuku corrects him, saying that it's actually lightning, but whatever. Izuku says that he'll be able to control it by the time, well, he needs to. He'll get it all done and get ready to go, and he'll take on UA, get in, and even be better than Bakugou. Bakugou scoffs at this and says that he had amazing control over his quirk since day one. He's a prodigy. Izuku had to work hard for it, and frankly, all that's going to do is fall behind when Bakugou starts turning up the heat. Izuku finds it ironic that he used this idea of turning up the heat, but tells Bakugou that he will not fall behind, that there is no chance, there is no gap too big. Izuku will surpass him and will remain surpassed of him no matter what. Bakugou is pissed that he just said that he just basically undermined the fact that Izuku swears that he's stronger than Bakugou. But Izuku knows it for a fact. He knows his work ethic, he knows the quirk usage, he knows everything that's in his own arsenal is better and going to be better than what Bakugou can do now or ever. Izuku sits as he awaits the teacher to finish up speaking, and everything is eventually wrapped up. Izuku would head outside, and he would be writing in his journal as much as possible, trying to figure out, learn, and anything he could possibly think of, when he's stopped by Bakugou once again. Bakugou grabs his notebook, throwing it as he explodes it, telling him to give up now, that there are too many limits on what he wants to do, and that there is no chance he'll be able to keep up in the long run. No chance at all. Izuku tells Bakugou that he sounds ridiculous. At the end of the day, they both were gifted with an insane quirk. And to sit there and say that there's no chance for him to be a hero, that is absolutely outlandish. Izuku tells him this straight up and tells him that he's going to conquer whatever challenge that's to come, and he'll make sure that's the case. Izuku walks away as Bakugou is livid, pissed, frustrated with the fact that Izuku refuses to give up, but still, maybe he'll give up eventually when he realizes that his body can't hold up. Izuku would leave as he heads out, wanting to actually fix his notebook that was completely destroyed by Bakugou, but unable to do so. He goes the long way back home to try and write up on anything he possibly can to fix his notebook to a certain extent. Izuku would continue to do this as he walks underneath a bridge, but as he walks underneath that said bridge, something occurs. A manhole cover would bust open, and Izuku would look behind him to see a giant green sludge villain running after him. The weird creature is saying that he needs Izuku's body. Something about some pro hero, some All Might? He's not sure. It's all a mumble and all a jumble, and Izuku immediately sees this and he takes off running. He can feel his body immediately atrophy in a way. It's as if it's reacting without him even noticing, as if his body is reacting to the presence of an evil being there, a scary being there. He turns around and he immediately lifts up his left hand as lightning begins to strike all around his arm. His arm would then send out a huge blast of lightning, that the lightning surges around the Sludge villain as if it encapsulates him basically entirely. Izuku would then release more lightning as his fireside begins to conjure up, as if the need to be protected is making his quirks react. As the Sludge villain is surrounded by lightning, he's absolutely torn to pieces, as if it's a lightning storm that's being conjured around him. Izuku is holding his hand out, struggling, as his body seems to be reacting in a very, very bad way to the usage of his electricity, the usage of the lightning. Izuku would then stop as the Sludge villain would be in pieces. The manhole cover would open up once again, and All Might would be there. He would be shocked. The fact that this boy, this kid, he was able to do such a thing, was able to do all that, that's insane. How? Izuku has shocked everything, and All Might is shocked to see a kid, just some normal kid, be able to output such amazing strength. He begins to ask Izuku if he's okay, if he's alright, and Izuku would say that he is. He's actually more than fine. He's a little hurt. His arm feels staticky, but that makes sense when you have a quirk like his own. But overall, he's just fine. He's a-okay. He then realizes who he's talking to. It's All Might, the one and only, standing in front of him. How could he not realize this in the first place? He then greets All Might, asking for an autograph and anything else. He kind of freaks out, frankly. I mean, who wouldn't when it's the number one hero is standing right in front of you, and your hero is standing right in front of you. Frankly, this is an insane time for Izuku, and an insane time overall. Izuku basically loves All Might, and wants to learn from him, wants to be like him, be the number one hero. So Izuku asks a ton of questions, and of course it would eventually lead to All Might saying that he doesn't have that much time to talk. He's gonna have to leave, and he's gonna have to take off to more or less put away this Sludge villain, which is definitely understandable. I mean, frankly, the Sludge villain needs to be taken care of ASAP. But Izuku just asks him a couple questions. How he became a hero, how he progressed into being a hero, the one he is today, and if he could be the same thing. All Might then says that he doesn't have to be the same. He could be different, better. He can do far different things. He's met many, many, many kids, many, many heroes destined for greatness, but they cloud their own judgment by wanting to be him, by wanting to be something that they're not. But Izuku can be something amazing as well. He really can, as long as he takes it his own direction, his own way. This is the best advice All Might can give him. Train hard, work smart, and get ready for, well, a hard journey. To be a hero, your own hero. All Might says this, and this satisfies Izuku. He also tells Izuku that his quirk is very unique. Lightning and fire. It sounds like someone he knows. Sounds like someone very similar. I mean, he knows that the number 2 hero has a kid, and the number 2 hero actually has a boy that has a fire and ice quirk. Izuku is shocked to hear this, and All Might says that he has to go now. But he knows that he'll see Izuku soon climbing the ranks of being a top hero. All Might jumps away with the Sludge villain in hand in bottles, and Izuku is just in awe that the number 1 hero, and well, him being the number 1 fan of All Might, it just made him completely speechless at the fact that he gave him such advice. Amazing advice at that. With that said though, Izuku heads home, heading back to his mother, and of course his mother would be pretty concerned, asking if he's okay, and that if he's alright from, everything that occurred and everything that happened. I mean, not many would be okay, but Izuku was happy to get out unscathed, and also with some good advice. The training would be fruitful for Izuku, and that is an understatement. Izuku knows and really knows that he has the potential, and he'll continue to have this potential if he just works at it and works hard. He's been working hard all his life, so what's another 10 months to continue to work hard? He begins to train, running, sit-ups, push-ups, all you can think about, every bit of working and stressing his body to get used to his quirk is all the things he did. Throughout his life, he worked with saunas, hot areas, electrical environments, anything you can think of, and he'll continue to do that all the way up into the UA entrance exam, because that is where it matters. All of this training, all of his hard work, everything he's done up to this point will lead up to this, the UA entrance exam. His training would begin for 10 months, and after 10 months of training and studying, the UA entrance exam is inbound, and it's time to take on what is next. Izuku Midoriya will be taking on the UA entrance exam, and when he arrives, he sees a giant building. This building is a gigalith of a building, terrifying in a way. He looks at it and he thinks that this is something that he isn't sure if he's ready for, but he knows he's worked hard enough, so you might as well give it a shot. Izuku would walk in to the building, walk in to see everything so crowded, cramped, and people all around. Izuku would then hear a familiar voice speak to him about how annoying he's here right now. Izuku looks to see it's Bakugou. He ignores him and goes to sit down, and unluckily enough, they have to sit right next to each other. He awaits the, present mic to begin speaking, and the adrenaline begins to rush through Izuku. President Mike explains that first they will be doing a written portion of the exam leading to the practical version of the exam as well. He would go do his written portion and get ready for the explanation of the practical. The practical would then be explained, and President Mike would begin to explain exactly what's going to occur, exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be 1-point robots, 2-point robots, 3-point robots, and so on, and they're going to be taking on those robots to prove that they're able and are worthy of going into UA. These robots will all be evaluated based on point thresholds, and there is also a 0-point robot, one not worth any points and is best to just avoid. Izuku listens, and eventually it would finally be time. This would be Izuku's first chance to show what he's got. His electricity, or his lightning part of his quirk, is strong and honed. His fire side is far different though. He hasn't utilized it to the extent that he should, but he knows he can utilize it to at least a similar and small margin as his lightning quirk. He knows with them in unison and them together, it could truly mix to be a powerful combination. As he awaits the gates that would allow him to hopefully get into UA and lead him to the future he wants, he is terrified, nervous, and when the gates swing open, electricity and fire would run down his body and it would surround him as he takes off through the sky. He takes off through the air at insane speeds, and when he grabs onto the first robot, and electricity and lightning strikes all around it and it obliterates to dust, a smile would grow over Izuku's face, because this is truly his time to prove to himself and to everybody watching that he can truly be the next big and top hero. The next generation of heroes will then lie on his shoulders. He will be the next #1 hero. He will be the next All Might. Or, in his case, the #1 hero to come is Izuku Midoriya. But he'll finish up this test, and when he does, it will lead him to the pathway of UA. What happens next? Well, you'll have to find out what happens in the UA entrance exam, and what happens in the future beyond just this in the next parts of What If Deku had a half fire, half lightning Quirk, Izuku Midoriya charges forward. The entrance exam. Now it's time to show exactly what he has. After absolutely destroying, absolutely melting the first robot he sees, he can feel his power surging throughout his entire body. That he feels something that he's never felt before. This power feels potent, controlled, adaptive, as if he's now getting this feeling of adrenaline that he's never felt in his life. He begins destroying robot after robot, melting some with fire, or at least his limited fire that he currently has been training, and electrocuting or short-circuiting other robots as well. Let's be honest, this entrance exam is kind of perfect for Izuku. There would be no doubt in him winning and doing extremely well, if not the best in the exam. We're talking about robots that could be electrocuted, destroyed, overcharged, out-circuited, and so on and so forth. Izuku's quirks are perfect for this. They're made of metal, he has fire. They have electricity and components, he has lightning. All of these things support and affect and help him at the end of the day. So Izuku would destroy, absolutely obliterate a ton of robots. After absolutely obliterating a ton of robots, it was practically over. The entrance exam was coming to a close, but with the last couple minutes, Yue would open up the doors for the 0-point robot. The 0-point robot was a terrifying, monstrous robot. Huge, massive, towering even over buildings, and this monstrous robot seemed kind of out of place. Frankly, a robot like this should not be in a test of this magnitude, and it begins to walk forward, forcing rubble and also buildings to collapse. This would then lead to a young lady by the name of Uraraka to be covered in rubble, not being able to use her quirk because of how much she used it before. She's stuck, unable to move, and she can't do a single thing. Izuku is going to run away, just avoid this robot like he was told, but when he sees this, he jumps on the opportunity. He takes off and immediately tries to protect the young girl. He reaches his hand out, sending electricity and lightning all around, creating a wall of some sorts of electricity. As he builds up electricity made out of a giant wall, he begins to send it forward toward the robot. The robot is then being pushed back by this lightning, and this lightning is holding the robot just enough to hopefully allow Izuku to clear the rubble. He begins to hold the lightning with one hand and clear the rubble with the other, as the girl basically is telling him to leave before the robot overtakes the wall. Izuku would then close his fist as the wall begins to collapse on the robots, as it begins to get covered in electricity and lightning. Covering it would then begin to short-circuit it slowly but surely, but Izuku knows this is going to lead to the collapse of the robot, and it's going to lead to the collapse of the robot straight forward. Izuku then turns as the lightning begins to fade, and on top of that, the robot begins to fall. Izuku would grab the girl and begin to fly using only his fire quirk, being that he overused his lightning quirk. He begins to slightly fly, but when you're using only half of your quirk and only, well, half of your body to fly, you're kind of spinning. He tells her that he hopes that she's okay with dizziness and begins to fly, basically spinning in circles. But as they escape the range of the falling robots, he puts her down as he's kind of dizzy himself, and he falls down. He kind of laughs about this, but he sees that the exam is now finally over. Recovery Girl is making her way out to help as many people as possible, and Izuku picks up the girl once again to help her to Recovery Girl, sitting her down and telling her that everything's good now, that she should be healed up in a matter of seconds, very, very soon. Izuku waves off any healing from Recovery Girl and says that it's a pleasure to meet Recovery Girl, and it was a pleasure saving, well, whoever that is. Izuku would smile as he runs off. It's as if he's so quick. He knew these things would happen, and he doesn't want to even stay longer to conversate or even chat. He's so serious. It's kind of odd, because Izuku has always been a cheerful kid, and he still is, but he knew what this meant. He knew what this meant for himself, for his future and for his family. And he knew that he needed to take this very, very seriously. And the only way for him to take it that seriously is he needed to stay locked in the entire time, including after. After it's all said and done, though, Izuku would be extremely, extremely satisfied at the fact that he did everything he possibly could and everything in his power, which, frankly, is all you could really ask for. When someone does their absolute best, no matter what, it's flat out something that nobody else could even more or less argue with. This is something that Izuku has done, and this right here is something that Izuku can be commended for and can commend himself for. With that said, he heads home to his mother, and to speak with her about how it went, how everything went. He begins to talk to her about how well he did, what he was able to do with his quirk, and how he's able to basically utilize his fire quirk as kind of a support quirk in a way, allowing him to maneuver and move really quickly, like, well, flying. He's able to utilize it in such a way, but he says that in terms of power, it's nowhere near the one, basically his lightning quirk, not even close. But she says there's nothing to worry about. He's always worked on his lightning quirk first, so there's a reason for that. Maybe it's time for him to set aside his lightning quirk, at least for an extent, and work on that fire side. Because frankly, at the end of the day, he does not want to overuse his fire side and get himself hurt. Izuku will agree with this, or does agree with this statement, and begins diving into utilizing his fire quirk and actually sustaining his body more and more using his flames. Frankly, the combination of both flames and also lightning isn't the most concrete combo. Of course, he can make combos and obviously make beautiful attacks that are so powerful, but in terms of sustainability, it's extremely difficult. It feels draining, and yeah, the UA entrance exam felt easy, but that was also because it was beneficial that they were robots. It was a lot easier because of that. So he was able to just lean on his lightning side and win pretty easily. But what about other things? What about other villains that can counter him? That's something to think about way later on, but still, it's something he's worried about. With that said, though, they do celebrate a bit before he gets back to training, and eventually, after a couple weeks would pass, a letter would finally come from UA. His mother would be crying and entering the room saying that the letter is finally here. He would open the letter to see a hologram. That hologram is of All Might. All Might congratulates him, congratulating him on being the #1 in the entrance exam, saying that he's welcome and he's joining Class 1A, and he got in to UA High School. He says that he talked to him, well, all those 10 months ago, and he knew that he would be talented, and he knew he had the chance to be great. And this is now time for Izuku to prove that. Izuku is extremely happy. Like, there is no words that can describe how happy, ecstatic he is. He's trained so much, worked so hard. He knew what these quirks could do to his body if he didn't train, so he knew that he had to put his body through hell, and he did. And now he's here, the top student in UA. He's here to prove to everybody, prove to himself that he's the best, and he'll get his chance very, very soon. First stop is the first day of UA. And when he arrives, he sees a giant door, and frankly, it's intimidating. What kind of monsters, freaks are in here? He doesn't even know, but he can't wait to write them down in his journal. When he walks in, though, he sees the one and only Katsuki Bakugou, someone he did not want to see. But at the end of the day, Bakugou is talented, powerful, so of course, he would be sitting at a desk near Izuku. They're on the same playing field to an extent, but Bakugou feels that he's far superior. Izuku would ignore Bakugou as he's yelling with a blue-haired boy. The blue-haired boy would walk over to Izuku, eventually speaking with him, shaking his hand, being, well, nice, being grateful, whatever. He's kind of an odd kind of person, but still, he's a nice kid. Bakugou would yell at Izuku, saying that he doesn't deserve to be here and he shouldn't be here, but Izuku just ignores him. Eventually, the yelling would subside because Aizawa would walk into the room. Before Ochako could even say a word to thank Izuku for his help, Aizawa tells all of them to shut their mouths, that this is not social time. This is not time for them to chat, get to know each other, anything like that. He doesn't care about their friendships, their feelings. All he cares about is them getting stronger and being heroes. That's it. That's what he's here for. That's what he gets paid for, and frankly, doesn't get paid enough for. But still, he tells them all to head outside, get on their PE uniforms, and get ready for an assessment. Someone raises their hand and is about to ask about orientation, but Aizawa, before even hearing what they have to say, shuts it down, saying that they get praised enough. They don't need to get praised more. He tells them again to all head out right now. The real, or first, test of UA is about to begin, and that test is with the Quirk assessment. The Quirk assessment is more or less straightforward. The physical exams that you've gone through and during middle school, Aizawa sits there and begins to explain. You're going to throw a ball. You're going to run as fast as possible. You're going to do whatever you used to do in middle school, but this time, you can use your Quirk. Are we all in understanding? Everybody says that they understand, and Aizawa points at Izuku, telling him to come up here to throw the ball. Everyone is confused. What order are they going in? And Aizawa says that Izuku got the number one score in the entrance exam, so they'll go in order of whoever's the best. Izuku would grab the ball as he gets ready to throw it. He can feel power surging through his body. Should he use his electricity or his lightning? Should he use his fire side? What's better? How would it help? Would he be able to travel anyways? He thinks hard, long. What is he supposed to do? I mean, he wishes that he was just, strength. Wish he had strength, but he has to get creative. Izuku thinks, but then eventually Aizawa tells him to hurry up. Izuku nods as he focuses, and he lifts the ball with his right hand, being that of where his flames would come out of. But that's not what Izuku's going to use. Izuku begins to channel lightning in his other hand, as if a bolt begins to basically form in his hand. This bolt begins to slowly but surely changing into more of a disc-like figure, and he then throws the disc as he throws the ball on top of the disc, and it shoots off into the sky. Eventually, the disc would dissipate, almost in a matter of seconds, evaporating into basically nothing. But this momentum would carry the ball super far, actually throwing the ball to about 1,000 meters. The ball rode the lightning, you could even say. With that said, though, he's ecstatic, happy. Aizawa kind of smirking in a way, kind of creepy. But I mean, frankly, anything Aizawa does is kind of creepy. But Aizawa says that it was a very creative way to use it, especially when he knows physically he's not that strong. Impressive. Izuku goes back in line as many others begin to conclude their ball throw, including Bakugou, who gets just under Izuku, in which he's frustrated at the fact that he couldn't and didn't beat Izuku. But this may even make Bakugou stronger in the long run, wanting to train even harder and even more in the future. But everyone begins to basically clamor about how interesting, how amazing this is going to be, how fun. This is like a game. But of course, Aizawa does not like that. He does not like the idea that they think this isn't serious, and he'll make it serious, telling them all that whoever gets last will be expelled, definitely ups the ante, in which Izuku isn't too worried about it because, frankly, why would he be? He's already the top student, and there's no way he's going to flop on all the rest of the portions of this Quirk assessment. And you'd be correct to make that assumption as well, because Izuku would have no problem with the grip strength. Yes, of course, it would be a little bit more difficult, but through just training himself and just, utilizing his lightning quirk, he's able to put a little bit more emphasis on that squeeze, and he's able to get a pretty decent score. Nothing insane, but pretty decent. In terms of the sprint, or basically the run or the straight line, very easy as well. He utilizes both of his quirks, his fire side and his lightning side, to try and fly. It's only a short distance, so he doesn't really need to worry about stamina in the long run. Easy peasy. He makes it past there without a hitch, and he'd be pretty quick as well. With the rest of the things, sidesteps, whatever you want to think about, he does really well. I mean, no doubt about it. Leading him to getting first in the quirk assessment as well. There would be no doubt that he would get first. I mean, he would do really well on every single category. Bakugou would be pretty close. Same thing with Shoto Todoroki, in which Shoto has been very keen on watching Izuku. He has fire as well. This is weird. Izuku is kind of tripping Todoroki up, as if like, why does he have a fire side? He's just like Todoroki, but he's using his fire side. This would inherently make Todoroki not really like Izuku, but let's be honest, there's no reason for him not to like Izuku. It's just because he has a fire side and he's using it, and it would just make Shoto highly uncomfortable. With that said though, Izuku doesn't even know really Shoto Todoroki and who he is. He knows about him a little bit, but he doesn't really have much grudge, or wasn't even really watching him either. But at the end of all of this testing, it would be all wrapped up. An invisible girl would have the last place on the exam, and frankly, that would be no surprise in my opinion. She would get last place, but Aizawa would eventually say that he just kind of did it as a hoax. He wouldn't really want to expel anybody, and he would see the potential that every single one of them has, even including Invisible Girl. I mean, that's a pretty good quirk, especially for a hero to have, stealth-wise and so on. So he tells them that it was just a hoax, even though they know later on that this was no hoax. He would have genuinely expelled everyone and genuinely expelled the person that got last place. It's just something that he would do and something he does, just to prove a point at least. With that said though, this day would be wrapped up and finished. One of the hardest days, I assume, and many would assume, Class 1A would ever have. Well, actually, at least in comparison to what they've done in the past. Most of these kids, most of these people, have not trained, have not worked hard. Izuku, on the other hand, has. There's a difference. All of them, or most of them, haven't really trained, worked hard, stressed their quirks, but frankly, that's whoever the strongest are normally the ones that have stressed their quirks, and you have to be extremely gifted to just be powerful on your own. Izuku would arrive the next day and be excited to see what they're going to do next. And this would be something that Izuku would definitely be interested in, and that is hero training. Heroes versus villains. Aizawa would say that this isn't his thing necessarily, so he'll be passing them off to All Might. He enters the room with a large "I am here" and tells them all to get on their hero outfits. Izuku would do just that, and frankly, they've been building this hero outfit for a long time, perfecting it and making it perfect for his half fire, half lightning side. Basically being able to channel his lightning and fire through gauntlets that are far better than you would possibly imagine. They're simple though, nothing too crazy, nothing like a grenade gauntlet like Bakugou, but similar in the aspects of being able to control it, being able to concentrate these blasts through his gloves so he doesn't have to basically waste stamina on condensing it, which is definitely beneficial. When he made that disc that basically the ball rode on into the sky, it was very difficult to concentrate it, and it made him extremely tired, but luckily he didn't have to do much else in terms of real physical and really hard activities after that, so it didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But still, these gauntlets and his suit is built for him to basically have success with concentrating his lightning and also his fire. And he does have a setting where it opens up a little bit more outside of just, just concentrated blasts. When he arrives with All Might, and All Might begins to speak to the class, he begins to tell them all exactly what's going to happen. what they're going to do, and exactly what the hero training will look like. Heroes versus villains. Villains will be protecting a bomb, and the heroes need to seize that bomb. The villains win if they capture both the heroes, or the time runs out. Heroes win if they touch the bomb, meaning that they seize the bomb. And this would get everyone excited. Everyone is excited to go full on, all out, and show exactly what they can do. And this is going to be a perfect time for Izuku to go head on with Bakugou. But they don't get to choose who they go against. So it's going to be a little bit different, because Izuku will be going against Todoroki. Todoroki and Tenya Ida versus Izuku and Ochaku Uraraka. Todoroki and Tenya would actually be the heroes in this situation. Todoroki would have malice toward Izuku as if he doesn't like him. Izuku would try to be nice to him, saying that he wishes him good luck, but Todoroki doesn't even flinch, doesn't say a word. And Izuku's confused. Ochako would ask what that was about, but Izuku says he doesn't even know who that guy is. I mean, he knows he's a Todoroki, which he can assume that his dad is, Endeavor, but he doesn't know who Todoroki really is at all. He doesn't know anything about him, and he assumes that Todoroki knows nothing about him too, which is a definite valid, thought process, because Todoroki literally doesn't, which is funny enough. But Izuku doesn't really think too much about it as they get ready to protect the bomb, hiding the bomb in a room and just basically putting it in a place where they don't have to worry about it. Izuku begins to talk about Todoroki and Tenya about what he probably can see them doing, and that's, freezing the entirety of the building. So Izuku tells Ochako that they should get into a situation or into a place where that they can avoid the frost and avoid all of the ice that is going to be accumulated. But here's the thing, if they do get hit with ice, he has fire. He can melt it off and it won't really matter at the end of the day, but it will become kind of annoying to fight within the ice. So he tells her that they're going to protect this bomb as much as possible, and wherever the bomb room is, he wants to more or less make it so they can't freeze over in that said room, which the 5 minutes would be up and Izuku would get ready for a giant bit of ice. He has no idea what it's going to look like, but the entire building begins to freeze. Izuku thinks that this is even worse than he thought it would be, and he begins to kind of heat up the room slightly. As he does, the ice melts away and it begins to turn into water. Izuku then thinks that he has an idea. A really, really good but bad idea at the same time. Izuku will tell Ochako to follow him into the staircase and Ochako would ask what they're doing. He begins to more or less heat up the ground. As the ground begins to turn to water, or at least the small bit of it begins to turn to water. As the water begins to pile up because of the ice and the thickness of the ice as well, it begins to kind of drip throughout the building. And as it drips throughout the building, it begins to more or less make more and more water. No, he's not going to flood the building. That's literally impossible with the amount of ice that Todoroki would expel. But right when they hear a splash, right when he can hear footsteps, he hears Todoroki and Tenya touch ice and touch water. Izuku would tell Ochako to stand on a guardrail and do not touch water at all. Do not at all. She begins to basically levitate, thinking that this would be the better idea, in which Izuku nods and kind of smiles, thinking that is probably the best idea. He then grabs her hand as they both levitate, and he begins to send a pulse of electricity or lightning toward that water, as it begins to transfer throughout the water, electrocuting everything, and eventually electrocuting Todoroki and Tenya Ida. They get zapped, and Izuku would immediately retract the lightning and the electricity out of the water after he hears their reaction, diving down, covering them in capture tape, as they're both deemed the winners. Now, Izuku needed to make sure to regulate, because frankly, yeah, he's a villain, or technically a villain, but he didn't want to send electricity like crazy and lightning like crazy, and, kill 2 people. That probably wouldn't be the best idea. So he did regulate it. So it wasn't too bad, just enough to kind of stun them and put them down enough so that he could capture them. Ochako is happy to see that that plan worked out so well, and it was something that was on the fly. Izuku didn't even really think about it until they were kind of already in the situation, which is pretty impressive if I say so myself. Izuku would be happy they won, and All Might would explain certain things about basically what they could have done better and what Todoroki and Tenya Ida could have done better. He explains that, well, at the end of the day, you have to know and basically figure out what someone's quirk is before putting yourself at a massive disadvantage, because you may think that you're setting yourself for a massive advantage, but that advantage could turn into a disadvantage faster than you can possibly imagine, in which many others believe this to be very true as well. This is solid knowledge to know, and Izuku more or less schooled them, frankly, at the end of the day, made them look real bad at a possible quote-unquote advantage that they swore they were going to have. He then tells them if they're hurt, they can go to Recovery Girl, and that Todoroki and Tenya Ida did a good job too, but it's just something to think about. Izuku is happy that he won, and he appreciates the praises from All Might, of course. Bakugou, when he goes up though, he's pissed. He wasn't able to take on Izuku. That's who he wanted to take on. He wanted to take on the nerd, but trust me, he will get that chance sooner rather than later. With that said though, everyone begins to basically finish up their tests, or finish up their hero versus villains training, and everything would kind of go relatively the same, but this time around Bakugou would definitely get the win. I mean, there would be really nothing stopping him, and he would definitely be able to win this time around. But beyond that, they head off, and the day is basically over. I mean, they just do other stuff throughout classes, but the next day would finally basically arrive. That would be where everything would change in the mindsets of every single young hero in Class 1A. Because the USJ is a rescue training facility, and their rescue training facility is something that is gonna go real bad, because they will need rescuing. Izuku and Class 1A will be put in a situation that no child, no kid, no teen would possibly think they would be in. A long bus ride of chatter, a long bus ride of innocent bickering about whose quirk is the best will be the last time, and the last time they will be smiling, at least for a little bit. Because when they open those doors to the USJ and Pro Hero 13 allows them to step in, their fates for the rest of their lives were sealed. Because the first time they see villains is a place that they felt was going to be safe. A place that was going to be good for them. Their own school, within a rescue center, and within a training center. The League of Villains will arrive. Shigaraki, a Portal, Kurogiri, a Nomu, and hundreds of villains would arrive right in front of them. Aizawa would look to his kids, look to the kids he needs to protect, and as a pro hero, and as, well, a proper hero, he would charge forward into the field of battle. But how will the students react? How will Izuku Midoriya react to truly the first terrifying event? The Sludge villain may have been scary. The Sludge villain may have gave him a little bit of hesitance. But this is a full-on villain attack with no escape. Will he be able to channel the lightning and channel the fire to protect everyone around him, and on top of that protect himself? Well, you'll have to find out if the people of Class 1A and the students of Class 1A will need rescuing, or will they be able to defend and rescue themselves. The USJ has been invaded. Villains all around, and Izuku is in complete shock. What is supposed to happen? What are they going to do? he watches as Aizawa steps up and fights a horde of villains. It's truly terrifying. Truly. Yes, he's gone against this so-called Sludge villain before. He's gone against some sort of, or villains of that regard. But this is so much different. So much different. And the only reason why is because the intent. He can feel it. He can feel that these villains are here for a reason. Villains are here for a greater purpose. As he's debating and as he's thinking about these things, a portal would open up in front of all of them. Of course, Pro Hero 13 would be right there to protect them, but Bakugou and Kirishima would jump forward to try and fight this so-called warp portal or warp gate villain by the name of Kurogiri. But it would not go very well, leading to all of them getting transported away, and Izuku Midoriya would be sent to the worst place they could possibly send him, or at least in theory. He gets doused in water and thrown into what looks like a big lake, and he sees there's a boat nearby. He looks around, and eventually he would be attacked by not small monsters, but monsters that are basically like fish. But these are actually villains. Villains that are built like piranhas and fish and also scary water creatures. But luckily, Tsuyu is able to pull him out of the water. But she's happy to see him, and Mineta, that is also there as well on the boat, is confused why. Izuku says that it's because this is the best case scenario. This right here is over. And Mineta asks once again why that's the case, and Tsuyu smacks him on the head slightly, saying that he has lightning in one of his quirks. Half of his body can produce electricity. And Izuku smirks and lifts up his left hand as it electrocutes the water beneath them, basically knocking out and injuring severely all of the villains below. He then tells Tsuyu to jump as far as possible while carrying them, and he'll push them further throughout the air using his quirks as well. As they do this, they're able to sustain kind of flight in a way over a good little distance, so they don't actually touch the water, and then they arrive on mainland once again. The goal here is to more or less get back to their class, at least to help as much as possible with whatever is going on. But quickly, Izuku would see that Aizawa is still fighting all of these villains. But luckily, he's having a pretty easy time doing so. So he tells Tsuyu and Mineta that they should head up to the rest of his class, or rest of their class. They begin to head up the staircase, but just as Izuku is, it seems that Aizawa is about to run into far greater trouble than before. That's because Shigaraki has now entered the fight, and that's with also the Nomu. The Nomu, a giant monster that is genetically made up of multiple quirks, and sustainability with those quirks is insane, but at the same time, it's a brainless monster, a monster that is fully controlled by Shigaraki himself. Izuku sees this and immediately bolts off to help out as much as possible. More specifically, help out Aizawa, because he's going to need help with a monster that monstrous, a monster that bad. So immediately he would dive in to protect Aizawa, or at least help him out, blasting by, grabbing him and pulling him out of harm's way. But it's not that simple. Of course, Shigaraki and Kurogiri are right there, so they are able to assist the Nomu in some sort of way, and Shigaraki would tell the Nomu to kill Aizawa and that dumbass kid. Of course, Izuku would stand in front of Aizawa, but Aizawa would tell him this isn't a good idea. He shouldn't be fighting here. But Izuku says that he can hold off the Nomu. He can feel it. He's been training for so long with these quirks. He knows he can. He immediately starts sending lightning toward the Nomu, and this would restrict the Nomu's movement a far bit, actually restricting his mobility entirely. His slow walk toward Aizawa would become even slower, and when Shigaraki tells him to go quicker, the Nomu would begin struggling his way forward, actually hurting himself quite a bit. Yes, he does have shock absorption and so on, but this is far different than that shock absorption. But when he moves forward more, Izuku would begin to use his fire side, as using both concurrently he hasn't done really ever, but when he does it, it begins to strain his body tremendously. The right side of his body begins to kind of crack, begins to overheat, and he begins to feel the effects of it. But just as he feels that his skin is going to peel, crack itself off as if it's becoming this molten like skin, as if his arm is about to fall off, it feels, he just thinks to himself that he needs to push himself further, because if he doesn't, Aizawa could die, everyone around him could die, everyone around him could get seriously hurt. He wants to protect everyone. He wants to be a true hero. He pushes himself further, but out of nowhere his skin would feel better, as if he's cooling down, but he's still using his fire. He doesn't understand. Maybe he's figured it out somehow on accident, but that's not the case. Shoto Todoroki is right there. He begins to use his eyes near Izuku, cooling off one side of Izuku and also just helping regulate his temperature entirely. This would help tremendously. It would allow Izuku to stay maintained, and Izuku would look over towards Shoto as he would nod his head as if it's some sign of respect. Shoto may not be ready to use his fire side, not himself, but he will help Izuku utilize that fire side, because that fire side is not his father's. That fire side is something that he was born with, and that's something he is utilizing to its fullest capacity. The Nomu is stuck in place and is slowly but surely degrading from the combination of the lightning and the combination of the fire. Degrading slowly. As it softens up its skin, it begins to peel off and slowly but surely degrade the quirks that are within the Nomu. Izuku didn't know that this would happen, but it's something that he's happy that it is, because it seems that he's able to at least help out with getting everyone away from the Nomu and securing the idea that Aizawa and many others are completely safe. But there is no beating this Nomu. He wasn't going to defeat it, because Shoto Todoroki may have been able to help, but this was not going to finish the job, because eventually Izuku would collapse to the ground and only be able to look up at the Nomu regenerating. But it seems that the regeneration is slow, weakened, and everything about that Nomu is weakened. So when a giant noise and a giant thud is heard, and a giant man comes out and says, "I am here," Izuku smiles, because All Might has arrived. One giant punch to the Nomu, and the Nomu is out of commission entirely, sent flying outside of the USJ. All Might then looks towards Shigaraki and Kurogiri, telling them that this is how it's going to end. Them in prison. All Might is about to charge forward, but portals open and Shigaraki and Kurogiri escape with no trace at all. Izuku looks up at All Might once again, and, well, he sighs in relief as he passes out entirely, and he's gonna be asleep for a little bit. But when Izuku would wake up, he would wake up in Recovery Girls right next to his mother, who's been concerned the entire time. Izuku knew that there were repercussions to using his quirk the way he did. It was kind of like a all-out trump card in a way, and something he's never really prepared for, at least not to that extreme limit. But still, he was able to protect those around him, and he was able to be the hero he knows he should be and could be. But with that information said and that information done, he's told relatively quickly that he's extremely limited in power, that he can't really use his quirk, and that's going to be a bit of an issue because the UA Sports Festival is coming up very, very soon. Actually, in the next day or so. He asks what is he supposed to do, and they say that he can be in the UA Sports Festival, but the issue is he won't really be able to use his quirk. And he's kind of shocked to hear this, but he feels that The UA Sports Festival is a great opportunity, so he can't just let it go. He goes back to class, and he's going to take on the UA Sports Festival with limited quirk usage, if not mostly completely none. Now, this is where things get extremely difficult. We're talking about a event that is built to show off your skills with your quirk. He's not going to utilize a quirk, at least try not to utilize it for the mass majority of the time, because he is told that he can use it, quote unquote, but not to the point that he'll be okay if he uses it or overuses it to a certain point. So that's what he does. When the UA Sports Festival arrives, he, of course, is that number one student, so he would have a speech to talk about. He would talk about basically that they're going to give it all they have, and that's all. He doesn't even bring up the fact that he can't really use his quirks. And funny enough, many of the students and many people in general are extremely surprised. Why not bring that up? It'd be kind of like your scapegoat. Now nobody's going to judge you, but many may judge you because you're not utilizing your quirk. But Izuku doesn't want to make excuses. He doesn't want to make or have a scapegoat, because what happens in the line of work when he's hurt, when he's injured, and he's forced to push himself further? There's no reason to make excuses, and that's the last thing he'll do. He's not going to make any excuses. Izuku would get ready for the first event, in which Midnight says that it is an obstacle course race. Let's just say there's going to be a bit of struggle involved. But still, he has a mind for things just like this. He would progress in the obstacle course race, passing through the corridors and also passing through the robots. But he would be kind of in the back with the other people that kind of are struggling. But eventually leading to Izuku crossing over this giant canyon and eventually making it to the minefield. The minefield is exactly where Izuku's going to thrive, and exactly where his brain is going to really allow him to think. Izuku comes up with the same idea of digging up the mines and creating a giant explosion that would send him forward. So he does just that. He makes a giant explosion that would send him flying forward, and he's able to somewhat gain speed and gather himself entirely. But the only issue with this is Izuku may be restricted in his quirk, but he's also restricted in his body. He was extremely injured, or at least his use of his quirk made him extremely injured. So when he recovers, he still isn't able to get first place. He's able to get about third or fourth behind someone like Bakugou and Todoroki. But even Todoroki has a mutual respect for Izuku, especially after what he just did. He even says that Izuku was real impressive right there, especially not being able to use his quirks. Izuku nods and says that he's going to give it as much as he can and give as much as he has throughout this time. But the restriction with his body and the restriction of his quirk, well, it's kind of difficult to really do anything. The cavalry battle may actually allow him to end up on top, and there's an argument made that he could probably have an even better team than what he had initially, but let's just say that it's him, Ochako Uraraka, Mei Hatsume, and Tokiyami. Yes, they would make it out of the round, but in terms of the 1v1s, he would fall short to Shinso. And many would question why he didn't use his quirk. Many would question if he just took a dive, in which it may seem that way. And to Izuku, he kind of would want to have taken that dive anyways, because Shinso was in an unfortunate spot. Like he said, Izuku was or is really gifted. He has a quirk that is absolutely insane, and Shinso has, well, this brainwash quirk, one that makes him seem like a villain. Izuku doesn't really mind losing to someone like that, someone that would benefit from the win against the number one, well, student in UA, quote unquote, or in class 1A. So Izuku would be forced to watch from the sideline. Shinso would fall relatively quickly after, but he already got the benefits from beating Izuku, and as Izuku continues to watch, eventually would lead to the finale. That finale would be Katsuki Bakugou versus Shoto Todoroki. And this fight right here would be one for the ages. Bakugou would come out hot, charging forward to try and clash as much as possible, trying to more or less put Todoroki on the back foot. His utilization of ice, though, would definitely keep him in it, but once that ice begins to crystallize on his body, and once his body begins to slow down, his whole thing begins to crumble. But there's something different about Todoroki this time around, and Izuku even stands up and smiles. He tells everyone there that the game and this fight is over. Izuku would put his hands in his pockets and would be in complete awe, would be staring right at them, in which everyone thinks that he means that Bakugou has won. But just as they all think this, fire would erupt from the middle of the stage. Fire would consume the area, and the ice around his body would begin to fade, would begin to melt. Shoto Todoroki has broken the wall, and through the interaction with Izuku, through that interaction, he's now using his fire side. Todoroki would eliminate Bakugou, knocking him off the stage, and Todoroki would look toward his father. He would basically scowl or growl, more or less, being angry, of course, but then he would look toward his class, seeing Izuku, and Izuku has a smirk on his face. Todoroki nods as if it's an acknowledgement of the fact that Izuku has put him over that edge, has made him realize that the utilization of his quirk is his own, and Todoroki has now shown the world that he's number one, or at least number one in the UA Sports Festival. All the medals are given out, and there is no Bakugou to get all mad and huffy. Of course, he's frustrated he lost, but at the same time, he lost to somebody using all of his power. Todoroki is happy with this, so is Bakugou to an extent, but he won't admit that. And Izuku is happy to see the success that came out of this, even when he wasn't necessarily the prime example of it. Izuku the next day would arrive to see that he actually doesn't really have that many offers. It kind of backfired on him. Maybe he should have just taken the UA Sports Festival off, but he showed and proved to himself how far he could get even without his quirk. Luckily, his recovery is coming to a close, and he's going to feel pretty good coming up here, so wherever he does go, he'll definitely benefit. But when Izuku would look through what choices he has and where he's allowed to go and where he can go, he would eventually see one person that stuck out more than everybody combined. Endeavor. Why would Endeavor? And then he looks over to Todoroki, and Todoroki looks at him and nods. Todoroki himself actually sent this offer. Endeavor has no idea, but he'll tell him now. Todoroki begins to text his father, telling him exactly what happened, and his father's not too happy about this. But Todoroki says that, he did mistakenly offer, he can't backtrack on it now. In which Endeavor gets frustrated because he knows Todoroki sent that acceptance, and Todoroki sent that offer. Todoroki gets a small bit of revenge in a way, but he's also now able to work with Izuku, someone that has a fire side, and someone that has a half and half quirk just like him. So they'll be able to have extremely fruitful training, and he'll be able to at least ignore his father to a certain extent, so he doesn't have to deal with, all of that. With that said, though, Izuku Midoriya is going to basically work and train under the number 2 hero, Endeavor. Now, with that said, how will this all go? What will happen? And how will this training exactly help Izuku and help Todoroki? Well, you'll have to find out in part 4 of What If Deku Had a Half Fire, Half Lightning quirk. Izuku Midoriya has made his choice, even if his choice is a pretty good prerequisite, especially because of who he's going to be going with. That's with Endeavor. Endeavor is a fantastic pick, and obviously Todoroki had one heck of a job getting that fake note in for him, and Endeavor can no longer deny the fact that he has to now help Izuku. But in a way, this is good for Endeavor as well. Good for both of them, because Endeavor wants Todoroki to use his fire side. What's better than having somebody else also utilize a fire side and teach Todoroki everything he's learned on his own, which is definitely something Izuku doesn't mind and will definitely do in the future, or during the future. With that said though, Izuku has his own priorities. He wants to get stronger, he wants to get better, he wants to get faster, all that stuff. So that's exactly what he's going to do. During this agency, and when him and Todoroki head to Endeavor, which isn't necessarily in the agency of Endeavor, it's more like his household or some office space, he speaks with him, and Todoroki and Endeavor talk about what they're going to do, in which Endeavor makes it clear that he's only here for his son, only here for Todoroki, but Izuku doesn't really mind this at all. He kind of expected this basically to be the answer. But that's okay. He's not really tripping or worrying about it too much. He has his own provocative, and he knows exactly what he wants to get done and how far he wants to get throughout this time. So he's going to worry about that and not worry about whatever Endeavor says. For starters, a lot of the training between Izuku and also Todoroki will be very fruitful. We're talking about constant fire training, something that Izuku definitely needs. His quirk is very, very powerful, but also very scary. We need to realize there are drastic effects to utilizing a quirk this powerful for a long period of time and at the same time. We're talking about extremely powerful electricity, enough to charge an entire house. Very similar to one of his classmates by the name of Kaminari, but let's just say that his lightning is a little bit more precise than Kaminari's. And with the fire that is almost as strong, if not stronger, than Todoroki himself, and basically the fire that was given to him by his father Endeavor, well, let's just say that has a big toll on one's body, a giant toll overall, and will continue to have that toll throughout this time. But his body seems to be adapting, and he took the right precautions to basically adapt his body, which is ironic enough because his quirk is so evolved to the point that he really did need this. He really did need the preparation, because when he becomes an adult, his quirk will always just evolve more and more and more, which is a scary idea. With that said though, the prerequisites that Izuku did before this, all of the training he did and all of the persuasion he did with his mother teaching him and helping him as much as possible, it definitely benefited him in the long run. Because after the training with Endeavor and Todoroki, it's pretty clear that Izuku is definitely beyond Todoroki's firepower at this moment, and definitely beyond a lot of the capabilities that Todoroki can currently output. But at the same time, Izuku has his lightning side. But of course, Endeavor doesn't like the fact that Izuku is showing up his kid, and he's going to make sure that it doesn't stay like this forever, and he wants to make sure that Todoroki gets way stronger. So they do commit to the idea of training as much as possible, especially together, because that's going to benefit Todoroki the most and be able to help him more or less catch up to Izuku to the best of his ability. With that said though, Izuku does do all of this with Todoroki, and they both get extremely more powerful throughout this time. But who's to say that the training isn't limited? I mean, after a long period of time, they do decide that they need more field training. Field training is really what matters. Frankly, that's what matters in the long run. And yeah, the brutal quirk training that they could go through does help and benefit, but training in the field, that right there is undoubtedly something that will benefit everybody and every single hero. So they decide that they're going to go on some patrols in Hosu City. Hosu City being a place that is pretty notorious for villainy and pretty notorious to have a ton of villains around. So they do expect a large sum of action, in which that large sum of action will definitely be beneficial for him and everyone else around. I mean, that large sum of action, patrol, and all of that will just straight up benefit everybody involved. And what seems to be a normal day, just, capturing villain here and there, would turn into something that nobody would even expect. Nomus would begin to come out of nowhere, attacking hero after hero, hero after hero, and everyone would be in complete and utter shock. Endeavor says that this is the time for them to show what they can do and get some real training as they begin to fight all of the Nomus, everything and everyone, at least right in front of them. But there's one issue, one giant issue, and that is Tenya Ida. Let's just say Izuku and Todoroki are truly not paying attention. They're not. And they're not really thinking about who's here and who's not here. And when they finally hear Emmanuel say something about Tenya being gone, missing, let's just say there's nobody fast enough to even get there. Izuku would dash off, flying through the air, Todoroki very close behind using his ice. But when they arrive, the dead body of Tenya Ida would lay there with a sword in his back. Of course, the hero killer is still standing right there. He proceeds to slash a hole through Native, another hero that is currently there as well. And Stain looking over at the kids, saying that if they were here to save them, they were a little too late. But if they're lucky, they can get out with their lives. Izuku is enraged, furious, pissed off. Todoroki says that they need to play this calculated. They need to, as he turns to his right to look at Izuku, all that is there is fizzle, lightning, static. As if time itself stops, Todoroki would turn to his left slowly as he sees that Izuku has already closed the distance between him and the hero killer, and lightning and fire swirls around him. Izuku's eyes would be flashing as the lightning seems to be taking over most, if not both, of the sides, as if the lightning is creeping over into his right side. It's odd, as if the lightning itself is becoming the only quirk that exists, but that's not the case. Lightning is speed, is action, is reaction, and is quick fibers. Izuku knew that he needed to be fast, and on top of that, his anger itself is electrocuting everything around, shocking the entire area. We're talking about buildings and all of their power getting shut off instantaneously, power lines sparking like crazy, overloading every single grid you could possibly imagine. Izuku slide tackling obviously the hero killer to the ground, as the hero killer can be heard screaming, electricity evaporizing and basically scorching him. As he screams, silence would then basically dissipate once again, making it so that everything in the alleyway is quiet. Izuku picks up the hero killer and looks toward Todoroki, and his eyes are as if it's just one giant lightning bolt. His eyes are just static, and then he's gone. Izuku's just gone in a literal blink of an eye, in a literal flash. He's gone, and he drops the hero killer right next to some of the other heroes, as the hero killer is only hanging on to life because Izuku made it that way, shocking his heart back to life, making sure that he has to pay for what he's done. He then dashes back, and he's standing next to Todoroki as if he's twitching everywhere, as if he's moving back and forth without even knowing it. Todoroki tells him he needs to calm down now, right now. Todoroki looks around, trying to find something that could basically contain the electricity, because it's actually starting to fizzle his own hair. He can feel all the hairs on his body standing up, but luckily he's able to find something on the road, like this weird or this odd looking blanket, or basically this material that would allow him to at least slow down the conductivity and basically the spread of the electricity, throwing it over Izuku as he tackles him to the ground. Luckily, he got this because there's a separation between him and Izuku, and he tells Izuku to stay right there, not to move. and he basically makes sure that Izuku stays there until people come. Eventually, the lightning and the electricity would calm down, but Izuku himself would really be afraid to move, because he can feel that his body is still shaking, still twitching, as if it's jumping in and out of different speeds and different out of different versions that he just created. He tells Todoroki that he doesn't even know what kind of power he just showed. It's as if his fire was gone. It was all just lightning. That's it. Izuku doesn't even know what to think, what to say, what even just happened. When the other heroes would come and basically see what happened with Izuku and Todoroki, they would see that Stain is already in custody, and on top of that, Izuku's kind of on the ground underneath some sort of blanket. And Endeavor would tell them that this is kind of an awkward situation. They would bring them back to the hospital, and they would speak about what's going to happen, especially after Izuku goes through some testing, especially because they want to see the repercussions of what happened with his quirk. Luckily, nothing too insane happened, but Izuku definitely needs to keep his temper in check, you could say. But the whole deal with the police force and saying that, hey, you can't do that, Endeavor will take the credit, blah blah blah, it happens all over again. I mean, that's a simple thing that's going to happen, and Izuku is completely fine with this. But there is some repercussion to what he did, and that repercussion is a bit of nerve damage. And it's more that Izuku actually is going to feel actually a little bit less pain than normal, and in a way they might think that this is beneficial for his quirk because, well, he can kind of, it's like breaking off the limiters, but at the same time it's not good because he doesn't know when he's completely and utterly, well, in a good, bad, and basically bad spot or not, which is definitely concerning. Because, I mean, if Izuku doesn't know he's really injured, then that's definitely an issue. But they say that the nerve damage, in terms of all of that, will soon go away. So it won't be permanent, but he will feel less pain overall. So it's going to be a kind of an awkward experience. Think of it like if you go and stub your toe, it actually won't hurt at all, which maybe for some of us seems like a great thing. But if Izuku takes a regular punch to the stomach right on the button, he might not even realize that it actually did more damage than his body is actually giving off, which could eventually arise a bit of an issue. But still, anything too powerful would definitely not worry about the limiters, so if he takes a punch from someone very strong, it won't really matter at the end of the day. He'll still feel more or less the full brunt of that attack. Now it's time for them to head back to UA, especially because of all the incidents that just occurred, and, well, Aizawa and UA believe it's best for them to come back a little bit early. With them coming back early, he does speak about what's going to happen and what's going on. He speaks about, they speak about one thing, which is the forest training camp, and on top of that, they speak about the final exam, and they're both more or less intertwined, and the fact that if they do really well at the final exam and pass it, they can go to the forest training camp. If not, they have to stay here. And obviously this is a bit of a lie, but Aizawa likes to test his students to the best he possibly can, and that's exactly what he's doing at this moment. Izuku, when he hears this, though, he is pretty excited, frankly, pretty excited at the idea that they're going to more or less test them to the best of their ability. And Izuku wants to see how far he's truly come, especially after the training with Endeavor, and also utilizing whatever power he was able to utilize against Stain, something he barely remembers. It's as if it was just a blaze of glory and a flash of light. With that said, though, the first part of the final exam is also just a written, so any studying that they do is going to be beneficial, and studying in general is going to be beneficial for what is going on. So they get in there studying, and as much as they possibly can, and do as much as they possibly can, and it would eventually lead to the written portion of the exam. Izuku passing it pretty easily. I mean, it's not too hard for him, but after finishing that up, it's now time for the practical, in which initially they kind of think it's going to be simple, robots, stuff like that, but that's not the case. Robots aren't very practical, frankly, not even close. Why would robots be practical? I mean, they're very easy to dominate, very easy to destroy, and it would be very simple for everybody in Class 1A, very, very simple for people in Class 1A to absolutely eliminate all the robots in a blink of an eye. Think about it. Izuku would do that. Nothing, basically with one hand behind his back. And Izuku realizes this. And when they arrive at the gym, they get explained that, well, let's just say some other stuff is going to happen outside of just robots. No more robots, not this time around. What happens is they'll be taking on the teachers. Now this right here is something that kind of threatens them and definitely makes them feel a little bit more uncomfortable. The teachers are pro heroes trained at that, and Izuku is just curious who he'll be taking on. After some time would pass, he would learn exactly who he's taking on, and it's actually kind of terrifying in a way. The person he'll be taking on is All Might. All Might is going to be their opponent, and that right there is terrifying. All Might is a beast, a monster of a hero, someone that is extremely powerful. So, well, it's not going to be that easy of a fight. But who's his partner? Well, it's Bakugou. Someone that he's had issues with and someone who he'll continue to have issues with. Bakugou is arrogant, annoying, and very brute-like. And he knows that Bakugou will give him some trouble, but still, he knows he'll have to take on whatever they need to do to defeat All Might. Or attempt to defeat All Might. He tries to start up a bit of a plan with Bakugou, actually, explaining, hey, that we should do this or that, and try to stall All Might up. Maybe they could weaken him in a way, slow him down with their quirks, but Bakugou wants none of that. Absolutely none of it. He wants to take on All Might head on, head first, destroy him. He wants to obliterate All Might. That's his goal. And of course, this isn't really the best idea. I mean, we're talking about All Might here, guys. We're talking about All Might, the #1 hero, someone extremely powerful. And, well, that's not the best idea. He tries to convince Bakugou otherwise, but there's no convincing Bakugou. So they're going to have to take on All Might head first. So when it's their time to take on All Might, it's a scary feat. Because when they charge forward, the power of wind and the power of the shockwaves of All Might's punches can be felt from buildings away. But luckily they're able to control the distance, and he lets Bakugou take on All Might sort of by himself, but Izuku maintains the range. He knows how powerful his lightning is. He knows that he can slow down All Might, so that's exactly what he's going to do. He watches as Bakugou smashes into All Might with explosion after explosion, trying his best, All Might wondering where Izuku is, but he waits, bides his time. And of course, Bakugou says that he doesn't need that nerd. It's all about him now. He can defeat All Might by himself. All Might scoffs at this as he's about to grab Bakugou, but just as he's about to, this bolt of lightning comes soaring in. And of course, All Might would dodge it just barely, seeing the flash of lightning or seeing the flash of light. And as he basically dodges it, he thinks that he basically snuffed out a sneak attack, but Izuku wasn't aiming for him. He was aiming for the lamppost. As he hits the lamppost, the lightning begins to bounce, and it begins to destroy other electrical things around, and Izuku basically contains more and more power over this course of this time as the energy and lightning itself begins to go absolutely insane, absolutely haywire. Izuku begins to charge up like crazy, spamming lightning and fire everywhere, slowing down All Might. Of course, All Might is strong, extremely powerful, but one can only maintain its body so much when lightning is striking it, when it's getting slowed down, when the nerves within the body are getting struck and basically tempered with. All Might can feel that his punches are getting weaker. All Might can feel that he is getting slower, and that's exactly what happens. All Might could feel the lightning and the electricity surging to the worst part of his body, which would be the part that is extremely injured. And just as it is, he knows that he needs to stop the fight now. He immediately takes a knee as if he has to give up, and he admits defeat. Everyone is shocked, but Izuku knows exactly why he did this. And it's not like he just couldn't read All Might perfectly, but he knows what his electricity was doing, and it was reaching a certain part of his body that All Might, I guess, decided that he wasn't as durable there. After the fight, and obviously after they're deemed the winners, Izuku would ask All Might about why he stopped it, in which All Might says that he was just outplayed, outsmarted, and they deserve the win. But Izuku knows this not to be true. He asks one more time, what's the real reason? In which All Might shakes his head and says that that Izuku must be extremely intelligent, because he knows that he can tell, or that he knows that he can basically get his mind wrapped around exactly what happened. They then speak for a little bit, and All Might reveals his injury and more, and so on. He reveals more specifics though, and he tells him exactly what happened and exactly why he was put in that scenario, and why he was that strong, or why he was set back so much. And Izuku is shocked to hear that he's basically injured that much and still maintains this crazy bravado and this crazy idea that he's still the #1 hero. And he tells All Might that he really should get recovered. He really should get better. Maybe if he gets better soon, he can continue to be someone so powerful. But All Might says that there is no way he'll get better. There's just no way for him to truly get fully healed up. The injury is just too bad. In which, after hearing this, Izuku feels kind of down. It's sad, honestly. But he knows that All Might isn't invincible. As much as they would love to think that idea, he's not. Nobody is. So this does give him a bit of an awakening. After the injury that he had, even if it was so minor, so minuscule, and maybe it's going away as of now, and the nerve endings have been recovered more or less, I mean, he's not invincible. If he utilizes his quirk improperly, he utilizes his quirk badly, I mean, he could end up just like All Might. He could end up truly in a bad position. Of course, Izuku has to think this over, but he knows that the way he is now and the way he acts, he would absolutely sacrifice everything to be a great and honorable hero. But that's a conversation for later, and a thought later. He won't think about it too much now, because All Might is still alive, and he's still working, and he's still the #1 hero. But he might need to figure out a way to utilize his own quirk properly and not overload himself like he did against Stain. And if he does overload himself, he better damn well be prepared for it. With that said, what's next up is Aizawa telling the entire class that they're going to the forest training camp, well, pass or not pass. And Aizawa would take them all on the bus the next day and get ready for insane training. For starters, they would all go to a mountain and wait as the Wild Wild Pussycats would launch them all off the mountain, but the real training would start in that forest. Monsters and monsters alike. They would fight all of them, and when they arrive at the forest training camp, that is exactly what they'll need. They'll need power, strength, and to utilize their quirk to the best of their possible abilities, because there's something coming. There are people and villains alike that want, well, All Might and these students dead. But there's also someone else that makes them very curious, makes them very interested. Is it Izuku? Maybe it's Bakugou. Maybe it's even Todoroki. There's many in UA that interest them, many alike. But Izuku and Bakugou may be the ones that the League of Villains have their eyes on. Maybe for their power, or maybe for their attitude. The Forest Training Camp. It's somewhere that they can hone their skills and truly get that much stronger. The goal for Izuku is to basically get more strength with utilizing his lightning and fire quirk, and on top of that, get more used to it. After the little incident that happened, it definitely put in the back of his mind that he needs to be a little careful, and on top of that, needs to be paying as close attention as possible. Because frankly, nobody wants to just throw their life away for, well, no reason at all. Izuku knows this, and he doesn't want to have himself get hurt in the long run, so he'll make sure that he doesn't. But the training is very, very brutal. All it is for Izuku is outputting his fire and outputting his lightning as much as possible. They even have a certain area for him to do so that would allow him to more or less output this crazy wave of power in a place that nobody gets hurt. He'll utilize it over and over and over again as much as possible, just so that he can strain his body and then rebuild it back up in a more suitable form, more or less just utilizing it as much as possible to then equip himself better for next time. Izuku would continue to do this more and more and more and more, and eventually it would get to the point that he would feel relatively comfortable slowly but surely with all of this utilization of his quirk. But to be fair, he'll never truly know if he can sustain his quirk properly throughout a long period of time, and how strong he can really amp himself up in the future, but at least he's getting somewhat used to it. A day would pass though, and this eerie feeling would fall over the camp. Everything would seem okay initially. Everything would seem fun, as if everything is going fine. Everything is perfect. They would go about their training, they would do everything normal, and they would even have a little bit of off time to do a bit of kind of a game type of thing with all of the class. But this is where things get really weird. Really, really odd. Because that's when things kind of go off the rail relatively quickly. What's going off the rails is exactly what happens during the Forest Training Camp, and that's a villain invasion. Izuku would be eating his dinner, thinking that everything is just fine, and think, you know what, I'll take food up to this kid that decided to leave before, well, dinner was even ready. So he heads off to give him said food, and when he arrives, he tries to do so, but the boy is staring at something in the distance, completely petrified. And of course, well, Izuku has no idea what's going on until he turns. It's a giant monster of a man by the name of Muscular. Muscular stares at Izuku, pointing at the boy, saying that to make this easy, allow him to capture Izuku and he'll let the other kid walk. But they need Izuku, and they also need someone else by the name of, what was it? Bakugou? Of course, Izuku hears this and immediately charges toward Muscular, electrocuting him with his lightning and then blasting him with his fire. Muscular says that he's going to have to do far more than what he's doing now, because they planned for this. They planned for Izuku's lightning quirk, and there is no way he'll be able to output enough to put him down. Muscular would begin to swell up even more and would begin to charge towards Izuku, as Izuku tries to fend him off with lightning and also fire. Yes, it would slow him down to an extent, but not enough that it really would matter. Izuku would immediately grab Koda as he darts off, pushing him toward the edge and more or less allowing Koda to leave to a safe spot, telling him to run to Aizawa now. He darts back up, Izuku would dart back up toward Muscular as he strikes him with lightning and fire while being mid-air. Muscular says that he knows he can't stay there the entire time, and he'll have to come down eventually. Izuku would continue his onslaught, striking Muscular over and over and over again as much as possible, trying to make some sort of presence, make some sort of advantage. Of course, this is easier said than done. Izuku doesn't even know what's holding this guy even up right now. He's blasting him over and over and over again, and nothing's working. He might have something within his body, maybe something that's like an insulator, reducing as much as basically reducing all of this power that Izuku is pumping into him. But maybe he can overload him. Maybe he can knock him out via some way. Izuku then charges forward as if it's like some sort of blaze of glory, spinning over and over again as he crashes into Muscular, flying upward. Izuku hasn't utilized his quirk like this ever, but he's going to try now. He begins flying Muscular up, and Muscular begins to punch him and breaking bones in his body as he does. Izuku using an aura of electricity and lightning to basically hold Muscular's arms away from him and make sure that he can't more or less squeeze him to death. Izuku flies him toward the clouds as he pushes him up, and Muscular thinks that he'll just fall to the ground. I mean, this is fine. He's lived and survived far worse than this. And just as Muscular thinks it's over, Izuku would reach his hand, his left hand, toward the clouds and begin to summon lightning that he never knew he could, and a giant lightning bolt strikes down on Muscular, slamming not only him but also Izuku toward the ground below. He slams back onto the mountain, and Izuku would see a Muscular to the side of him, out cold, completely done. It seems that the muscles that he has begin to atrophy, and the nerve endings begin to stun him, and it more or less paralyzed him. And Izuku lays there, moving his body, feeling the pain all over, and he realizes that at least he doesn't have the same damage he did before, but he basically can't move. He's stuck there. And just as he tries to move, he looks up to see a man standing above him in a weird outfit, throwing a marble at his face as he's just is put in this realm that he has no idea where he's at. Eventually, he would arrive in an unknown area, an unknown building. And when he would arrive in that building, he would be confused, extremely confused. He would be looking around thinking that he must have been captured, which he would be correct, but he looks to his left to see that Bakugou is there as well. Izuku immediately would try to break free, but it seems like he can't. It seems that he's surrounded by insulators that would absorb everything that he would output, from flames to also lightning. Bakugou would wake up and try to more or less escape as well, but he would struggle too, trying to do so. But Izuku would tell him that it doesn't look like there's anything to prevent Bakugou from using his quirk. As he says this though, about a couple minutes later, people would walk in, the League of Villains. The League of Villains would walk in and begin speaking to both of them, talking to Bakugou more specifically about the power he holds, and on top of that he could become one of them, a villain, someone that could do anything they ever wanted to do. They know that he's interested in it, just the way he acts, the bravado. It's obvious. They look toward Izuku though and say that they don't really need him, but there is something they want to use him for. They begin to strap him down even more, and they tell him that they only need half of him technically, but they know how strong he currently is and how much power he can output. They have a bit of an energy issue when creating some of these monstrous Nomus, and they know that he can fry nerves. That includes the nerves within the brain, stemming exactly and basically stemming exactly from the front to the back. Izuku would be able to eliminate all senses from the Nomus quicker than any machine could possibly do so they can have Nomus just like Kurogiri. Izuku struggles to try and get out. He even tries to use his lightning quirk, but nothing. Tries to use his fire, but it's absorbed. They laugh at him, saying that there is no getting out. They've already made every single bit of contribution to make sure that he can't move. They would look toward Bakugou and ask him what he thinks. And he doesn't, they say that he doesn't really have a choice, because all they have to do is utilize his friend here to wipe all the nerves of his body, and then he'll become more or less a glorified doll. Immediately Bakugou is shocked to hear this, and he would concede, saying that he'll become a villain. He sees the productivity in it. He can do whatever he wants. He can do whatever he pleases. It's interesting. They would allow him to get out of the braces or the handcuffs, and they would tell him that this is a proper idea, that this is a great choice by him, because frankly, it would all go downhill otherwise. They click a button, and Izuku begins to basically be completely engulfed in some weird contraption as he begins to get carted off by some scientists. Bakugou would ask what the hell they're doing with the nerd, and basically they would say that he's going to be their battery and also their experiment in one. Bakugou would look shocked at this, but just as he would look shocked, Shigaraki would realize that Bakugou has no intention of letting or basically joining them at all. Bakugou would immediately slam an explosion in Shigaraki's face and begin to explode everything around, and eventually send a condensed explosion toward that ball that has Izuku trapped in. As it explodes, it opens up a hole, and Izuku is able to more or less shimmy out of it, and Bakugou sends another explosion that he knows will hurt Izuku, but will break the chains and break all the contraptions within it, shattering it and allowing Izuku to slightly escape. Izuku would then smirk as electricity would engulf the area. He would immediately grab Bakugou and shove him toward the ground, because basically it would be the best way to avoid a lightning strike. He would strike everyone else above that or around them as he lays on the ground next to Bakugou, and it would knock everybody out instantaneously. But just as Izuku believes that he just won, that they just beat them, he has a realization of something. He feels as if someone has just entered the room. He blasts the wall open, telling Bakugou he needs to go now. As he turns and gets up, someone grabs him by the neck. A man in a mask. A terrifying mask. It looks as if he needs it to breathe, needs it to survive, and Izuku knows exactly who this may be. It's All For One. All For One would then have a portal appear beneath him and Izuku and the League of Villains as they would drop through. The wall that opens up would then reveal a bunch of heroes that were about to siege the area, but didn't do it in time. Izuku is gone in the grasp of All For One, and on top of that, well, Bakugou is standing there useless, as if he couldn't do a single thing. And that will live with Bakugou for the time being, or will hurt him in the time being. Izuku has been captured, truly captured now, and whatever they're going to do with him is a terrifying aspect. They want to make Nomu after Nomu something that would be extremely powerful. They can even combine tons and tons of quirks into one Nomu and don't have to worry about it running rampant, because the utilization of Izuku's quirk will do just that. If he utilizes his own quirk to basically more or less control of these monsters, well, that will be beneficial entirely. But it all starts with one person being under control, Izuku Midoriya. If they make him like Kurogiri, someone that will obey every single command no matter what, the production of the Nomus will increase tenfold. And on top of that, the power that someone like Izuku can hold with a more durable body will be insane. The perfect weapon. Izuku Midoriya once wanted to be a hero, but soon he'll be the perfect weapon for All For One and the League of Villains. Izuku has been captured, and the heroes have fallen short. All For One decides that he'll take his fight with All Might, well, pretty soon, but not now. He wants an advantage, and an advantage he knew or he never knew he could truly get, and that is with Izuku. Izuku is being experimented on, mind changed, mind molded to what exactly All For One wants, and this was long in the weights, long in the rafters. The reason for this was because of that one sole doctor. The doctor that knew of Izuku's quirk and the one that told him exactly how he should be utilizing it, how he can mold himself. But there's one fatal issue with Izuku's quirk: his brain. His brain is going through tremendous amounts of pain, electrocuting itself, overheating itself over and over and over again, to the point that his brain is now susceptible to all sorts of control, mind control at that, a perfect being, someone that doesn't have to be tortured, put through hell, killed, and then brought back from the dead to be completely controlled. Izuku is a human being, a true human being in a mindless body. Once All For One and everyone else experiments, and these experiments will now begin. Izuku would feel nothing during this time. All of the more or less the membranes and brain cells and everything in his head at this moment would begin deteriorating and reforming at the same time, as they begin to give him a quirk that would allow him to regenerate, and also give him a quirk that would allow him to be even more durable. The process was steady but relatively quick, and frankly, it didn't take much time before Izuku was in complete grasp of All For One. And once he was, it felt like everything for All For One was falling in place. He felt that everything was going his way. Izuku was now under control, and they even have Kurogiri on top of it. On top of that, they use Izuku to make more and more Nomus, using his own lightning quirk that has really no restrictions at this point in time. They begin to use it to mold the minds of every Nomu he could possibly think of. More and more and more. So the fight against All Might would come sooner than they would even possibly imagine. Yes, it's against what they were going to do normally, but now the true fight will begin. A war unprecedented than anything you could possibly imagine. But this war would be for deeper and more meanings than you would possibly even think yourself. While Shigaraki and the League of Villains were out dealing with a different issue, trying to recruit something and someone that they had no idea what would happen when they did. On top of that, Izuku would be sent out with All For One himself for a different purpose, just to stir the pot a little bit. They would arrive at a radio tower, and All For One would begin to speak within it, speaking to everybody in Japan. He begins to say that he has the kid, Izuku Midoriya. Such a fine young man. He makes such a amazing villain at that. Powerful, very powerful. Lightning and fire, one hell of a duo. He begins to tell everyone how he has taken care of Izuku, made sure that he's fine, given him power that he couldn't possibly fathom ever getting on his own, giving him the strength truly to surpass even the likes of Endeavor, someone who has insane firepower. Endeavor would hear this and basically clasp his hands, thinking he should have thought of this. Whatever he did, or whatever they did to turn Izuku to the other side, it must have been an effect of his quirk. And many begin to come to that conclusion as well. Maybe the effects of his quirk were far greater than they possibly could imagine. That's nothing they would have been able to know, at least at that moment. But now they're dealing with the repercussions. They're dealing with Izuku. Izuku would hover over everything with All For One, and immediately buildings would begin to collapse. Lightning would begin to strike down building after building. The buildings begin to crumble over, turn to dust. Izuku would stand there as storm clouds would begin to brew, and heroes would begin to arrive. Endeavor, All Might, Hawks. More and more heroes would boil over, come, and they would want to fight to take down whatever is to come. But All For One says that it's not just Izuku and him. Frankly, that would just be too much fun for themselves, so they have to pull back the leash a little bit. He taps on Izuku's shoulder as the left hand of Izuku would rise to the sky, as lightning would begin to basically shimmer all around, as if it's some sort of link between him and someone else. It would begin to strike many different areas around the place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. More and more bolts would come flying down as Izuku's arm begins to basically hurt itself extremely bad, but then would just regain all of its just skin and all of that back in an instant. But Izuku's eyes were different. Molded. Completely gone. Blank. A blank expression. No longer the green eyes the young boy used to have. That fire for being a hero. Extinguished. His right side, on the other hand, was far from extinguished. He would fend off the heroes as they try to stop him from what he's doing. And it's easy. Very easy. But maybe the main reason why it's so easy is because the other heroes don't want to hurt Izuku. He's still a UA student. He's still just a kid. He's just being used. So they're trying their best. Maybe they can save him. Maybe. But they don't think so. After some time would pass and the fight would continue, it looks as if there is no way of saving him. The Nomus that they're fighting seem to be progressively getting stronger, and everything seems to be collapsing. There's nothing they could really do. But maybe, just maybe, if they somehow can get to Izuku, somehow can speak with him, somehow can snap him out of this, they can maybe get him to switch his mind. They're not sure, but what they assume is his mind is gone. Completely gone. His brain wiped entirely, as if it's a brand new slate, as if he's been reborn. So there may not be a way to save him. There may be absolutely zero way to save Izuku, which is a terrifying feat. Can they beat a super powered Izuku and All For One? They don't think it might not be possible. But there's only one way. Only one way to find out. The heroes try to get across to Izuku. Any keywords, anything that he could hear, anything possible. He could hear a word, maybe hear a phrase, maybe he'll flip the switch, maybe he'll come back to them. He continues, or they continue to try to say things, try to say anything, trying to get Izuku to snap out of whatever he's in, trying over and over and over again. And it seems as if nothing is working. Nothing at all. All For One laughs at them in their face, saying that there is no way they even understand what's going on. They don't even get it. They're going to fall so far short, so hard on their face that they won't realize what's truly happening. There is no training. There is no purpose. There is nothing in this world that can stop them. And this would be true. Very true. But there's one thing, one giant thing that All For One didn't realize. Izuku has made a connection with the Nomus, at least intertwined to a certain extent. So when certain phrases, words, and so on are getting spewed toward Izuku in hopes to help him get out of it, in the idea of his mother, and on top of that, his mother even showing up on a screen of some sorts, it may not be Izuku who's absorbing these reactions, these people that are saying certain things that could snap him out of it. It's all of the Nomus that are around, leading them to transmit as much information as possible back toward Izuku. And this was a fatal flaw in something that All For One wanted. He wanted full control over the Nomus via Izuku, but the neural link between Izuku and the Nomus is the true downfall of everything that is going on. The true downfall of what's going to happen. Izuku slowly but surely begins to get memories. He begins to start flinching, twitching, and seeing things that he didn't know he could possibly see. But these are things that happened to him in the past. Things that truly did occur. Sometimes Izuku would do certain things during his childhood. Sometimes he would act certain ways. Every last bit of memories begins to flood back. Izuku's body begins to erupt in flames, then lightning. Then it begins to swirl around him as if it's some sort of tornado, a storm, a firestorm. It seems as if Izuku is now unlocked a new version of his power, something that a version of Izuku with no memories at all and only being under the control of All For One would never understand how to utilize. Izuku begins to then turn the Nomus. The Nomus begin to stop fighting with the heroes as they look toward All For One. All For One then tells Izuku to basically finish the job. What is he doing? But as the flames begin to get brighter and the lightning begins to get more hectic and the fire begins to spread everywhere, Izuku turns toward All For One, grabbing him as they both skyrocket to the sky, and as the Nomus begin to flee from the scene. Izuku then brings All For One all the way into the clouds as he begins to erupt. He's seen, well, Endeavor do this once. Actually, at least during training, in a way. A small, very small version of it. But this time he'll be copying him. A firestorm prominence burn. He absolutely obliterates All For One. Every last bit of power. He gave Izuku the means to do exactly what he's doing now. He kills All For One. The extra durability and the regeneration that Izuku has within his own body, that is what allowed him to do so. He begins to fall back from the sky onto the ground as he slams. The Nomus begin to kind of go dormant, sitting there, laying down on the ground themselves and not moving an inch. Everyone is there shocked. All For One is nowhere to be seen. All For One is gone. Izuku's laying there, not able to move an inch. It feels that a war just occurred right in front of them. Even though there's more to come, All For One's downfall and all of these Nomus and many more slow down whatever they have planned next. Izuku, on the other hand, isn't moving. Not at all. They pick him up and bring him to a nearby hospital, but when the diagnosis is read, everybody's face drops to the floor. This isn't good. Izuku's basically gone. There is no way to get him back. He was being controlled, mind-wiped entirely by All For One, and the rush of memories and restoration of his brain was too quick and too precise. And on top of that, the exertion of all of his quirk that he used within the sky, well, it made it even worse, accelerating his mind to the point of a very, very old man, accelerating his mind to practically mush, nothingness. Izuku is in a stasis of just sitting there. Nothing is going on within his brain, and he's sitting there, nothing going on with him in general. Everybody is sad, torn apart. He's just a young kid. Why did this happen to him? But it seems as if the quirks inherently were not compatible. It seems as if, in a way, maybe they were compatible for someone that wasn't going in the line of work that Izuku wasn't going to risk his life to the extent he was. But the compatibility of the flames and the lightning were too much for the brain of Izuku, and the power behind it were too much for him as well. His body wasn't able to adapt. Even all the training he did beforehand to make sure that his body would be ready, his body would be prepared for the fire and the lightning. At the end of the day, it didn't really matter. Everything that Izuku worked for may have collapsed, but at the same time, he's made his mark. The death of All For One means a lot of things for society. And on top of that, the future is within the hands of All Might and his successor. So in a way, Izuku has opened the door for many, many people and opened the door for the future of Hero Society. And all of the things that may happen in the future will have to be done without him. And that is the end of this story. The end of What If Deku had a half fire, half lightning Quirk. And if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a sub, make sure to leave a comment down below, all that good stuff. And yeah, that's about it. The next half and half Quirk that I do may or may not end in a similar way. I'm sure there's going to be people saying that I kill characters all the time, which I really don't, but I know people get really upset about that. But he's not technically dead. He's just, you know, brain dead. But still, these are things that I like doing to keep you on your toes about certain stories. But if you really were paying attention, you would have assumed that something like this was going to occur. But with that said, I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have an amazing day. Later.